Hello everyone, thanks for joining us again today for our chapter book story time. We're here at the Caribou Public Library. I'm Miss Erin. We're continuing to read Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. We're on the second half of chapter 37, which is called New Impressions. If you remember, Amy and Laurie are both in France, in Nice, and they have met each other on Christmas Day, prepared for a Christmas party at the hotel where Amy is staying. And so now they are meeting each other at the party. All right. She looked unusually gay and graceful as she glided away, and she seldom ran. It did not suit her style, she thought, for being tall, the stately and Junotesque was more appropriate than the sportive or piquant. She walked up and down the long salon while waiting for Laurie, and once arranged herself under the chandelier, which had a good effect upon her hair. Then she thought better of it, and went away to the other end of the room, as if ashamed of the girlish desire to have the first view a propitious one. So it so happened that she could not have done a better thing, for Laurie came in so quietly she did not hear him. And as she stood at the distant window with her head half turned and one hand gathering up her dress, the slender white figure against the red curtains was as effective as a well-placed statue. "Good evening, Diana," said Laurie, with the look of satisfaction she liked to see in his eyes when they rested upon her. "Good evening, Apollo," she answered, smiling back at him, for he too looked unusually debonair, and the thought of entering the ballroom on the arm of such a personable man caused Amy to pity the four plain Mrs. Davis from the bottom of her heart. "Here are your flowers. I arranged them myself, remembering that you didn't like what Hannah calls a soot bouquet," said Laurie, handing her a delicate nosegay in a holder that she had long coveted as she daily passed it in Cardiglia's window. "How kind you are," she exclaimed gratefully. "If I'd known you were coming, I'd have had something ready for you today, though not as pretty as this, I'm afraid." "Thank you. It isn't what it should be, but you have improved it," he added, as he snapped the silver bracelet on her wrist. "Please don't. I thought you liked that sort of thing." "Not from you. It doesn't sound natural, and I like your old bluntness better." "I'm glad of it," he answered, with a look of relief, then buttoned her gloves for her and asked if his tie was straight, just as he used to do when they went to parties together at home. The company assembled in the long salle à manger that evening was such as one sees nowhere but on the continent. The hospitable Americans had invited every acquaintance they had in Nice, and, having no prejudice against titles, secured a few to add luster to their Christmas ball. A Russian prince condescended to sit in a corner for an hour and talk with a massive lady dressed like Hamlet's mother in black velvet, with a pearl bridle under her chin. A Polish count, aged 18, devoted himself to the ladies, who pronounced him a fascinating dear, and a German serene something, having come for the supper alone, roamed vaguely about, seeking what he might devour. Baron Rothschild's private secretary, a large-nosed Jew in tight boots, affably beamed upon the world, as if his master's name crowned him with a golden halo. A stout Frenchman, who knew the Emperor, came to indulge his mania for dancing, and Lady de Jones, a British matron, adorned the scene with her little family of 8. Of course, there were many light-footed, shrill-voiced American girls, handsome, lifeless-looking English ditto, and a few plain but piquant French demoiselles. Likewise, the usual set of traveling young gentlemen who disported themselves gaily, while mammas of all nations lined the walls, and smiled upon them benignly when they danced with their daughters. Any young girl can imagine Amy's state of mind when she took the stage that night, leaning on Laurie's arm. She knew she looked well. She loved to dance. She felt that her foot was on her native heath in the ballroom, and enjoyed the delightful sense of power which comes when young girls first discover the new and lovely kingdom that they are born to rule by virtue of beauty, youth, and womanhood. She did pity the Davis girls, who were awkward, plain, and destitute of escort, except a grim papa and 3 grimmer maiden aunts, and she bowed to them in her friendliest manner as she passed, which was good of her, as it permitted them to see her dress, and burn with curiosity to know who her distinguished-looking friend might be. With the first burst of the band, Amy's color rose, her eyes began to sparkle, and her feet to tap the floor impatiently, for she danced well, and wanted Laurie to know it. Therefore, the shock she received can better be imagined than described, when he said in a perfectly tranquil tone, "Do you care to dance?" One usually does at a ball. Her amazed look and quick answer caused Laurie to repair his error as fast as possible. "I meant the first dance. May I have the honor?" "I can give you one if I put off the Count. He dances divinely, but he will excuse me, as you are an old friend," said Amy, hoping that the name would have a good effect and show Laurie that she was not to be trifled with. Nice little boy, but rather a short pole to support the steps of a daughter of the gods, divinely tall and most divinely fair, was all the satisfaction she got, however. The set in which they found themselves was composed of English, and Amy was compelled to walk decorously through the cotillion, feeling all the while as if she could dance the tarantula with a relish. Laurie resigned her to the nice little boy and went to do his duty to Flo, without securing Amy for the joys to come, which reprehensible want of forethought was properly punished, for she immediately engaged herself till supper, meaning to relent if he then gave any sign of penitence. She showed him her ball book with demure satisfaction when he strolled, instead of rushing, up to claim her for the next, a glorious polka redowa, but his polite regrets didn't impose on her, and when she galloped away with the Count, she saw Laurie sit down by her aunt, with an actual expression of relief. That was unpardonable, and Amy took no more notice of him for a long while, except a word now and then, when she came to her chaperone between the dances for a necessary pin or a moment's rest. Her anger had a good effect, however, for she hid it under a smiling face, and seemed unusually blithe and brilliant. Laurie's eyes followed her with pleasure, for she neither romped nor sauntered, but danced with spirit and grace, making the delightsome pastime what it should be. He very naturally fell to studying her from this new point of view, and before the evening was half over, had decided that little Amy was going to make a very charming woman. It was a lively scene, for soon the spirit of the social season took possession of every one, and Christmas merriment made all faces shine, hearts happy, and heels light. The musicians fiddled, tooted, and banged as if they enjoyed it. Everybody danced who could, and those who couldn't admired their neighbors with uncommon warmth. The air was dark, with Davises and many Joneses gamboled like a flock of young giraffes. The golden secretary darted through the room like a meteor, with a dashing Frenchwoman who carpeted the floor with her pink satin train. The serene Teuton found the supper table, and was happy, eating steadily through the bill of fare, and dismaying the Garcons by the ravages he committed. But the emperor's friend covered himself with glory, for he danced everything, whether he knew it or not, and introduced impromptu pirouettes when the figures bewildered him. The boyish abandon of that stout man was charming to behold, for, though he carried weight, he danced like an India-rubber ball. He ran, he flew, he pranced, his face glowed, his bald head shone, his coat-tails waved wildly, his pumps actually twinkled in the air, and when the music stopped, he wiped the drops from his brow and beamed upon his fellow men like a French Pickwick without glasses. Amy and her Pole distinguished themselves by equal enthusiasm, but more graceful agility, and Laurie found himself involuntarily keeping time to the rhythmic rise and fall of the white slippers as they flew by, as indefatigably as if winged. When little Vladimir finally relinquished her with assurances that he was desolated to leave so early, she was ready to rest and see how her recreant knight had borne his punishment. Referring to Laurie, right? It had been successful, for, at 23, blighted affections find a balm in friendly society, and young nerves will thrill, young blood dance, and healthy young spirits rise when subjected to the enchantment of beauty, light, music, and motion. Laurie had a waked-up look as he rose to give her his seat, and when he hurried away to bring her some supper, she said to herself with a satisfied smile, I thought that would do him some good. You look like Balzac's femme pente par elle-même, he said, as he fanned her with one hand and held her cup of coffee in the other. My rouge won't come off, and Amy rubbed her brilliant cheek and showed him her white glove with a sober implicity that made him laugh outright. What do you call this stuff? He asked, touching a fold in her dress that had blown over his knee. Illusion. Good name for it. It's very pretty. New thing, isn't it? It's as old as the hills. You have seen it on dozens of girls, and you never found out that it was pretty until now? Stupid. I never saw it on you before, which accounts for the mistake, you see. None of that. It is forbidden. I'd rather take coffee than compliments just now. No, don't lounge. It makes me nervous. Laurie sat bolt upright and meekly took her empty plate, feeling an odd sort of pleasure in having little Amy order him about, for she had lost her shyness now, and felt an irresistible desire to trample on him, as girls have a delightful way of doing when lords of creation show any signs of subjection. Where did you learn all this sort of thing? He asked, with a quizzical look. As this sort of thing is rather a vague expression, would you kindly explain? Returned Amy, knowing perfectly well what he meant, but wickedly leaving him to describe what is indescribable. Well, the general air, the style, the self-possession, the illusion, you know, laughed Laurie, breaking down and helping himself out of his quandary with the new word. Amy was gratified, but, of course, didn't show it, and demurely answered, Foreign life polishes one in spite of oneself. I study as well as play, and as for this, with a little gesture toward her dress, why, tulle is cheap, posies to be had for nothing, and I am used to making the most of my poor little things. Amy rather regretted that last sentence, fearing it wasn't in good taste, but Laurie liked her the better for it, and found himself both admiring and respecting the brave patience that made the most of opportunity, and the cheerful spirit that covered poverty with flowers. Amy did not know why he looked at her so kindly, nor why he filled up her book with his own name, and devoted himself to her for the rest of the evening, in the most delightful manner. But the impulse that wrought this agreeable change was the result of one of the new impressions which both of them were unconsciously giving and receiving. And that is the end of chapter 37. We'll see you all next time. Thanks for joining us.